All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is funny talking to my computer screen. I'm so glad to be here with you guys tonight. And it's a great evening tonight because we've got two incredible poets for you, Philippi Williams and Gala Mukomolova, who I'll introduce in a second. This is the Poetry Forum from the New School Creative Writing Program. I'm Camille Rankine, and I will be your host for the evening. So let me introduce you to these two poets and tell you a bit about what's going to be happening tonight. Philip B. Williams is the author of Thief in the Interior, winner of the 2017 Kate Tufts Discovery Award and a 2017 Lambda Literary Award, and a finalist for the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literature and the Tom Gunn Award from the Publishing Triangle. He received a 2017 Whiting Award, 2013 Ruth Lilly Fellowship, and a Kenyon Review Writers Workshop Fellowship. He's a co-editor-in-chief of the online journal Vinyl. He currently teaches literature and creative writing at Bennington College. Gala Mukomolova is a Moscow-born, Brooklyn-raised poet and essayist. She's the author of the full-length poetry collection Without Protection and the chapbook One Above, One Below, Positions and Lamentations. The recipient of the 2016 Discovery Prize from the 92nd Street Y and the Boston Review, Gala currently writes astrology articles for NYLON magazine, is co-host of Big Dyke Energy podcast, and a founding member of the Chapbook Collective. These are two very different writers in style and voice. But as I was rereading their books side by side over the past few days, I found myself moved by and excited by the qualities that they shared. They bend, form, and claim the space of the page as their own. They say what they came to say, how they need to say it, with a fearless, unflinching gaze and an unsparing tongue that softens nothing for our comfort, and yet manages to convey the soft vulnerability of a body moving through a world that is careless with its welfare. I'm so thrilled to be an audience of these voices tonight and to be in conversation with them. And to be able to share that conversation with you. So tonight we're going to be hearing from these two poets. They're going to read for us. Then we're going to have a little bit of a conversation with the three of us, and then we'll be opening up for questions from the audience. So feel free as the night progresses, as you hear poems that you're interested in, as you hear points of conversation that you're interested in, feel free to ask questions throughout the evening. And then at the end of the evening, we're going to open up and answer those questions. So we'll start with our readings. Gala, you can begin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. It's sort of like speaking to the Matrix because I can't even see anything. I'm going to read some mostly new poems, or what I consider new poems, although I write at such a glacial pace that new is like a span of a handful of years. And they're all from this like new project I'm doing with names. So they're like name evocative. The project is called Even the False is Tender, and it's from a Stephen Dunn poem called Each from Different Heights, so feel free to read that and cry a little bit later. This poem is called Anna, I Don't Forget. Anna, I don't forget those mornings I rested in your childhood. Blizzard town where time froze and we walked knee-deep in atmosphere toward each other. I was a stranger everywhere. I wept at the homeness of your language, weight of your pen's black lines, circumference of your thick hair bound and possibly ungendered leather, satchel at your chest heavy with stones a spell. Today's wind is bold. My windows shake with language. What is the message? Birds, trees, and buildings register, although they're human-made. I think I might be otherwise. Wish I wasn't prone to put myself in the center of stories of the earth, the heart, its weather. This clear sky is otherwise radiant. It streams through glass onto my hands, warming them. Sometimes I see a woman with rings on every finger and think of drives north to Astoria. That baker gave us her begonia because I loved its underside, hot red hearts. She loved us, our strangeness, raw buckwheat honey we bought off the truck religiously, rode over Young's River, so close to water, I could taste it. Anxious for wild coastline, there are days when I think I know why we loved each other, readily away from daily life and rarely in it. Days I unknow, like death unwinds a clock. Unknowing is a kind of language too, a kind of wind. If we had known how to forgive each other at the same time. In the shadow light, staring at a satellite, imagining an owl. It is impossible to really know another person. You taught me that. Wild things come as often as they leave, don't they? Marina, if you weren't in Russia. Marina, it's spring, this imagined separation. Our bodies, sleeping satellites looking back at Earth. We are small, not like children, though sometimes I think of us as children. My child self would have loved your child self and pushed her dutifully on the swing. Chains clinging overhead and ran behind her limb wild, awake, pretending, long enough for pretending to become the truth. Love can be like that for people, but not for us. Why is that? The ungentle animal way. I don't know how to love women anymore, Marina. I'm on your plane. Your face makes of my heart one season. In New York, I have seen no more than 5 lilac trees in the whole of Brooklyn. In Russia, I hope you wade through boughs of lilacs, lilacs older than your father. Death gives way to life. Of course it does. Everything is green again. Neither of us alone. I call the flat shape of your nose into my mind and breathe in very slow. Marina against tyrannies. In your house, I call a cabin, whipping cream for strong coffee in small teacups, rain overflowing a small stream. First time you brought me here, I liked it inside your eye, went into waist-high fields of grass seeking beating branches to raise our blood. I wore your shorts, I bound you to me. Your breath, red string pulled through a needle's eye, or tied gently around my wrist, sign that someone Russian loved me once and wanted to protect me. You were moving stones in the stream for your mother. You went down to the river. I was safe and warm in your forest house the morning the first child died in ICE detention. You were on the phone with your mother saying we got confused by the river, got confused by what the river wanted, moved some rocks around, now it's raining like crazy. Mama, forget about the river. The water is okay, Jenny says, sprawled on the shore, having not yet touched the water. Everybody looks out at the ocean and has a thought. I was a mollusk closed and riding foam. I beached this inlet's other side under rutting piers, once walkways to the moon, now smeared with hopelessness, blood of fish, salted inside the ruin of dreamland, piles of sunflower seeds, meatless, cleaved, wet, and littering the sand. Me and my leonine lover and neon amusement light. He brushed my hair behind my ear, loose. I knew I was a girl. I opened then and have been open ever since. Pearlless, purse powerful with emptiness. Women wade in 2 by 2, topless, adorned in chains. Beauty, I remember, is trading one truth for another. I would be like, how's everyone doing now? But there will be no answer. You have a Russian soul, Polina insists. Since some feral part of me suffers to throw herself down at lovers' feet in obeisance, belly up, recounting our Soviet estrangement. We sour-cherried our afternoon, Vishny, frozen pitted, my mother fetched for me from Russian market. I sugared 1 colander full, would have plucked fruit from low dark trees, but our season's over. Flour over all flat surfaces, roll dough, cobbled scraps, resistant to the rolling pin, dipping 1 finger in red water. Polina sealed each purse. I die to look at women. English vowels fill up my purse with foreignness. pressing postlingual, new embankment, tongue down to knuckle, all dikes an island, all mountains touch under measureless darkness, have known, have loved, have stood in place, churned stone, sainted animal, wounded hoof, resist healing holy, living in hovel of my companionship, lest in healing we forget. I'm sure one act is enough. My love, call me Sasha, Alejandro wrote. Never had a lover use a name that has power over me. Someone said, sweet girl, sweet girl, sweet girl. What was it like to be cared for? Sometimes knowing what won't be enough is enough. Tennessee, I'm thinking about free falling. At the karaoke bar tonight, you know how he draws horses out a little too long. It's almost a joke, but I don't think it's funny to love an animal. What if I tell you that's my favorite part of the song? Would it surprise you if I love you in a dream? You wrapped your neck around my neck, and my head rested in the crest where your scent is strongest. You were on a date with someone else. I had to remind you and untangle our necks. Your date didn't seem to mind. Horses are like that, Tennessee. They know the order of things and wait their turn. If I sing Free Falling tonight at the bar with this herd whose scents are strange, I just want to feel good again. Did you know that horses only lie down besides horses they can trust? Do you remember, Tennessee, that rooftop in South Brooklyn, how we slow danced and you breathed free into my ear and I breathed free right into yours? Thank you for listening. This is my last poem, and it is the first poem of this thing that I started doing. It's called My Love's Devotion of All Kinds. My love's devotion of all kinds. Body first, down dark back roads, dwellings numberless or without order. We came for red rock, relentless landscape stripped so God's hands stay on you. We came for Georgia, unmythed, whose ashes swirl the pedernal, juniper, pinyon, cedar corpses that claim this landscape for centuries. We're both dissociative, bilingual, brute, and girls, a fact not unremarkable given the black night and disappearing map. A man follows us for miles, speeding so we pull to the shoulder and wait for him, scream go when he pulls up. We punch a shark in the nose, and later we can't say what predator is since we're not perfect prey, which is to claim singular. Here, all of us witches, even and especially Georgia, who spent her 90s rattling up a ladder, naked and hard as a mountain, and Claire, having found our yurt, returned to the road's opening. Her car lights twin moons, and her heart, still as a horse's pressed against her herd, summoning us out from disorder, the many possible outcomes. A gun, for instance. A woman spends her life preparing for the wreck. I bet I'm speaking your language now, but rest assured every language I speak is incorrect. We empty our satchels out on carpet, feast by firelight. Claire brought 3 kinds of cheese and an apple pie. Under constellations I've never seen, a gratitude list. I'm not dead. You're not dead. Brights from passing cars project beams through the body of our dome. Paint the pedernal enough times, Scott said. In Georgia, you can have it. But the gods of white women have no jurisdiction over the gods of mountains. What do mountains demand? All of this once Rancho de los Brujos, marked by cow skulls, wild bones, long before Georgia, long after her. What's fear? And what is intuition? Counter-narrative of my body as a place of pleasure. A cowgirl named Sunny prepares our mounts, pairs us horse to girl, leads us out over Ghost Ranch. I lock my hips to a horse, I rock up red hills, red hills, red hills, riding behind Claire. Before Maya, our collective equine body purrs, scent of leather, smoke, sweetgrass, our sweat. All night, Claire and I don't touch. Two boats and a queen bed, tethered, bobbing dreams. Here, I pretend to see myself. Corpse, my hand over my heart all night. I save a seat, leave my sound on. Text me again, I'm no one's poem. I had a king, I served her. Apples in my mouth, and hive of shut-eyed bees, supine and honey. Her kingdom remains, maroon in me. Attraction, this dagger I take both ways. I touch a world where we go on together, knowing what's sacred is singular. Smoke is a veil, and mourning too. Across the yurt, a tiger guards Maya in her sleep. Our fire eats itself. By dawn, I wake first and stoke the flame. Thank you. I've turned off my timer.
Hello. So I'm still trying to figure out how to get this to work. So I'm going to be reading new poems as well. Gala, that was a beautiful reading. Thank you. I had a king, I served her. I love it. I hope I'm quoting correctly. Thank you, Camille, for having us here. It's going to be interesting reading and not being able to see whoever is listening, whoever's watching space. So the poems are coming from a new project called Mutiny. It's been in the works for a while and it's still not finished. I'm not sure when I'll finish, but I'll share what I have with you. The first poem is called Final First Poem. Distracted by beginnings, I suspect my index is on fire. They start spasmodic with hunger. My dull teeth catch on pale figures, voweling from an empty heaven. God, been left. Bored too with ransom for art, illusions stacked like reluctant saints in a pyre. Eliot, Alighieri, Homer. The sun's glossy odyssey traces half moon above the horizon, clefts these Alexandrine hours into shoddy boats. I'm tired of drifting toward nothing on. There was once a sea, I begin, having never seen a sea nor been able to seem any time to once. Now, I sleep and avoid documenting my rhyme-sourced wet dreams, and who would collect these metered christenings? I want to know what you need to know. I own nothing impressive, no noctuaries of gallivanting seeds, no beloveds creeping from sun-bloodied water in a salt-stolen dress, no oceans from which she stole her voice to give to me, to offer to you slow blinkingly, awaiting genius and a circle of rooks. All the crows have gone, my love, and all shovels cradling yarrow in jewels of beetles have rusted away, revealing my face all along held these things in unrequited climax to crown me king. The book is burning. Come, sit at my bedside, let ash fill in the fugue that was once your need. Now, open your hands. Reader, read to me what you have stolen and called your life. Order of events. Sorry for the thumb. First, he taught us to use the dead as shawls in the viscous winter escorting his arrival. Next, he taught us to forget the dead were dead, our dead, and dead because of a wager we did not consent him to make with the thin-lipped savior of his own pantomime. Third, he delivered on promises that blew off the tops of homes in places whose names he could not pronounce. Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, forced to fit a quiet country that has no need for a crown. Where once was honey unhived, competition. The drones meant for war prepared for war. We dusted our shoulders of shadow, silent reconnaissance, surveilled as practice for a slaughter we did not consent to. The royal parade, pride's malady stumped its sequence through, beat drums of human skin from which emanated a rhythm impossible to decipher. I, too, would shake my ass to the sound of stars falling nightwise into a pit of myth-bent nomenclature if the name sounded like home. Under eroding circumstances, this kingdom could become home. Under eroding circumstances, my gasp has become home enough. Love not consented to, yet detected from beneath my mindless right hand, pressing its devotion to ritual over my heart, flag above waving heaven and blood into the smoke-diffused sky. I quake my way through anthems beneath. Rockets glaring off my breath, forced to evidence I belong. The crown is crooked. We straighten it with vote-vapid hands. The crown sits too heavy for the king to carry on his own. When it falls, oh say, can you see, strikes its inquisition. My knees summoned to straighten at the hinges permission most questionably opens from. Strike the earth with a kiss. Could I kneel my way to revolution? Would that goad the king to unzip? Mushmouth's maybe crown. 1. Manacled man mangled, more overmade menace mass, maybe molded moribund, mostly manipulated. Magnanimously marred, mired, mushmouthed, moored more. Manacled man merrily measured, man monkey, mixed midst murky mirrors. America's man, minstrel married, mop head, magnum man, mama's mine. Might munched, manacled man mimics martyr movements, moshes minus music, muses murder-made manifestations. My madness, my master. 2. My madness, my master. Many mistake my mood manhandling my mode. Maybe me making minimalist mumblings means my matriculation, man-made monster, moves merrily, mystifying monogamy. Mainly me, my monsters, malicing municipalities. Me make maintainable moans, me menu, me metaphor, me madmen's monitored mission. Merchants masturbate midst my mouth, me might munch, make men mate monks my molars. My mausoleum multiplies. 3. My mausoleum multiplies, immemorial. Me misery, impossible emperor, am maybe me mid moonlight's improvisations. Me immediate, might's emissary. Mayhem maims my museum. Me improvise minutes, masticate memory, mortuary mammal. Mythic, melisma-minded, memory makes me meet myself minus mink, mirth, magic. Myself's mess makes me member muzzle, mincing mouth. Maybe murder make my mouth mine. 4. Maybe madness make my mouth mine. Me embellish mercy, mercy, mid-morning. Morning masquerades mercy, imposter. Mercy mouths impelled miracles. Miracles midwife my mind. My mind implies miracles emancipating me. Impressive. Me embroider impeccable embellishments. Maybe madness make my mouth mine. Me impress embroidered emblems amongst my muscles. Me emaciated emergency am embargoed myth. My embargoed myth emaciated imagined emergencies, implicated empty embraces. Emotions imitate monsters. Emotions must make music. Me, my monster, am mine, mine, mine. Implosive, me emperor, am imprecise empire. Maybe madness make my mouths minds. And after that, I had like, oh, what should I read after that? No idea. So just gonna read until my time's up. This is a shorter poem called Hunter. When you were mine, though, not mine at all permanently. Just a body borrowed without permission, a body interrupted, interruptive. The sky opened like a secret and a mouth with a word in it, word with an arrowhead in its flank. Love. Small creature it was, crying in the night beneath me. Shame. It begins with a memory of feet, and above the swollen ankles of Grandma Elizabeth's leg, cartographic with varicose veins, bulbous, and slurring beneath my fingertips as I traced what I thought was the blue of sorrow lacing its way like an endless brook throughout her body, which was a body whose toes I had rubbed one at a time with lotion to the sound of my grandmother chewing on a peppermint or breathing slow and hard as I relieved whatever journey from beneath her feet, sour with duty and the power to make a walk from room to room and to a meal and a game of checkers, where I learned that stacking two soldiers made a king which would become useful later in life, as I found myself making lonesome towers with my body and another's while we cataloged our grievances with the sharing of tongues. And here one desire usurps another, but I'll mend this memory toward honesty. For my grandmother's feet knew speed and precision when necessary. To run across the squeaking floor for a broom, to whack the shit out of me if I frightened her while she exited the bathroom, pausing right as she turned off the bathroom light and let her fingers linger on the knob just a bit, as though anticipating the boy me's hunger, to hear her scream with a round soprano, "Stupid, you trying to kill me?" And here again, the true stalls, because beneath me on the first floor where her room was kingdom of perfumes, shawls, and jewelry, this woman up and died while I laid in bed on the second floor right above her. And I was sure the chill I felt was either her passing through the floor and through me, then through the roof and into the sky where the morning sun was still cool and from which chickadees dropped their small bodies into the grass for seeds to pulverize in trees, or it was the angel of my thinking unblanketing from me my own innocence, knowing that my old lady went somewhere and left her body behind to be found by her children. And for a moment, I was closest to her, just a single story away, meaning the narrative that was the air itself crawling beneath my floorboards and her ceiling was the last thing we shared, and no one else can have that. And here, the dark bathroom and the metal doorknob with her fingers placed on the arc in the darkness is how she slowly unlocked me from myself, like the sun unlocked from my body its own shadow. And I hated myself for being so unwilling to let death do what death does and witness the final days of her hardly sipping water, her lying in bed alone and endlessly tired. And my selfish teenage self is here now, looking up from the cloud of this memory, shaking his head and swearing under his breath, swearing at me even now, too shy or too absurd with shame to run from that old house and into the distraction of maple tree seeds, whirly-gigging their papery blades into the weeds and the white fluff of dandelions, and into the street and scream something about it being too much or not knowing how to love them, so lay the fuck off me, man, just lay the fuck off. So I must forgive him who is my earlier self, his avoiding that room, his avoiding her eyes yellowed by chemo, his avoiding her feet, and now missing that cane, tapping out the minutes of the day, that now his later self holds in the highest regard, as I lay alone to sleep, listening to my downstairs neighbors make love in their softest voices. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you for those readings. That's so wonderful. I feel like we're really privileged to be able to hear new work from you both right now. And I'm sorry I can't see all the audience's faces and hear their what I'm sure would be uproarious applause at this moment. So just imagine that we are all doing that for you. So I want to next I want to ask you just a few questions about your work and just chat, just have a little living room chat amongst us. So I want to start with this quote that I was struck by in Gala, in one of your poems, Gala, I think at the first poem of your book. This quote from Marina Tsvetaeva: "There are poets with history and poets without history." I think of you both as poets with history, and I wonder if you would agree with that. Would you characterize yourselves that way? And what does being a poet with history mean to you, if so?
Oh, I mean, this is like one of her, I don't know if anyone, like if anyone's in the audience hasn't read Art in Light of Consciousness, they should, because it's just like this egotistical journey for her that's sort of amazing. Like it's amazing sometimes to read a poet who so deeply believes in their own intellect and in their perspective of the world and just be inside of it. And this is one of her like biggest premises of the kinds of makers there are. And I don't know if she really gives one more value than the other. It's just different. I think my relationship to being a poet with history is being someone who writes out of like generational trauma and also is like very constantly aware of that, of like my generational spiritual and cultural inheritance within a contemporary context. So how like constantly like putting like the layers of the past, which are always with us but already gone, onto like this moment. What about you, Phil?
My answer is similar, and particularly thinking about the layers of time, the layers of the past. I see myself as a poet who's deeply invested in mythology and creating a mythos for the contemporary, with the understanding that what could be easily assumed as understandable may require a different interpretation, because the answers of the now don't seem to be very useful. And I think we're always searching for, well, I'll speak for myself, I'm always searching for answers, even in my most confident mode. And when I think of myself as a poet of history, and this is the first time I'm actually thinking about that, I've not heard that phrase, I'm thinking of someone who's always in communication with the past and understanding that my particular body, the way that I have to move in the world, in this flesh, in this time, with this mind, with these beliefs and spiritualities, is always in conversation with who's come before, who's with me now, and who I can possibly make space for in the future. So that's, I think, I'm not creating in order to do that. I'm hoping the poems naturally converse and move along this cycle. I don't see it as linear. I see it as being one big loop, an interconnected loop, or systems of loops. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So along those same lines, and this is a question I was thinking about that I found kind of hard to put into words, so I'm sorry if this is hard to answer. I hope it's not. But I was thinking that, and this kind of really, I think, speaks to what you were saying, Philip, that there's this tension I sensed as I was reading your books, this feeling of being haunted by the past, but also a sort of refusal to be confined or caged by it, if that makes sense. And I'm wondering if that's something that you're thinking about as you write, and how do you balance like a sense of that legacy, of that inheritance, of that kind of pull of what's behind you with a forward thinking and contemporary approach to the page and the world of the page, and just like what you're talking about in your poems? Like, how do you find those two things kind of balance and meet on the page for you?
I can go if that's all right.
Yeah.
I didn't know if we were like going back and forth in a pattern.
Let's get the line, it's fine.
I think I understand the question. I see the past as being very freeing. I see the past as being very freeing. I don't feel shackled to it in as much as I feel deeply informed by it and sincerely invested in culling as much knowledge from it as possible.
Right.
I have anxiety about repeating mistakes, even though that is supposedly the thing that individuals do, that we do. but there's some mistakes that have dire or deeper, more deeper, that have deeper consequences than others, right? And so, in particular, when we think of, if I am to use this moment, what does it mean to be in a pandemic? What does it mean to repeat the mistakes of 1918? What does it mean to not learn those lessons, right? I don't want to find that out every 100 years, you know? And what I mean by that is I'm not living within the 100, I'm not living in that 100-year span as someone who has lived 100 years. I'm living in the mistakes of others' unlearned, behaviors. And so there's a way that there are consequences of ignoring the past. And there are ways of, by not attributing some kind of, I think, some kind of praise or understanding that there is vital information in the past, then the poetry suffers because it doesn't understand that it's in conversation with art that's come before it. And so I'm always actually pretty honored to put my poems in a space where they can exist from and also pull from the past, while still thinking of how is what they're aesthetically communicating or sharing, divulging, bring something forward to the present that might have been missed. I hope that answers the question. I think it's one large conversation across time.
Absolutely. I think it's so interesting that you would say like that the past is freeing, And I guess what you're saying there is like the idea of having that knowledge is opening doors for you, and that is freeing. Is that that's really interesting. I had not thought of it that way before. Gala, do you have a perspective on this as well?
I really honestly thought this was like a question for Philip about Philip's work, and I was like, cool, awesome. Let me just sit back. And then like Philip's answer was so complex that I got inside of it. So if you want me to answer it, you will have to tell me the question again.
I guess I'm asking about like how you balance like a tension between this idea of like being beholden or held by the past and also not being like confined by it in your work. And so like being a poet of history, but also being a poet who's very much living and like writing in a contemporary space and not necessarily like confined by ideas of the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that my tension, it feels like for me, my tension isn't about the present versus the past. It's about the present versus the future. Like, I think that's where I feel a deep sense of, I'm just going to call it angst. That's what I'm experiencing, I think. Like, it's like my teenager relationship to writing. It's like, what does it matter? It's like, that's where I'm at. I think because for me, when I was younger, poetry was a place that I came to survive. And it was a place where I escaped to. And if we talk about like personal past, then I was carving myself outside of like a lineage that did not recognize me or want me in the way that I was, right? And then, but I feel like as I've gotten closer to my writing and closer to myself and just like into my life, it's not that has changed. It's just that is no longer my biggest preoccupation and like inside of creative force. So I think that although it seems like what's happening here is a continuous sort of like emotional relationship structuring that I'm webbing, it is true that I wake up most days thinking about what is it that I'm creating for the world, inside of the world, that can offer up a counter force to this like just untenable cruelty and violence. So, and I wish that I had the sort of door or the portal already to have the language to really address that in a way that felt true and authentic to me. And I don't know if I have it yet. I'm looking for it, but I think that until I have that, what I'm trying to do is like offer up moments of intimacy and closeness and honesty, because so much of what I see and encounter feels counterfeit.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love the idea of like poetry and writing as a counterforce to what we're struggling against in the world, you know? Yeah, I wonder, Philip, if you have just, you know, if there's something that you feel as a writer, as a poet, that you hope to offer the world, and you know, is that something that you think about as well?
Beauty.
Well, casual question.
Yeah. What I always look forward to experiencing on the page is what can I render that, at least within my own subjectivity, is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I try to make something that has an aesthetic quality to it, that has musicality to it. I like repetition, I like rhythm, I like pacing, I like the same sounds popping up in the same words. So what I offer is my interpretation of beauty, and how that interpretation of beauty sits side by side with the ugly. Because I consider myself to be a poet of the grotesque, and that's not going to change anytime soon. But there's still a way to, and a reason to look at those things that frighten us, that gross us out, that shock us. And I'm not going to say I'm making it easier for people to do that, but just a different way of acknowledging the harm that we experience, and then also looking at death that is just a natural case, like in Shame, like that death had to happen. It was part of the trajectory of her life. What are the different angles of looking at that? How can I, and maybe this is actually the more honest answer, how can I render something so familiar in a way that it makes it unfamiliar? In a way that is, oh, I didn't think of it that way. I've never seen it that way. So, and that's more of a hope than, oh, here's my gift, new knowledge.
Right.
I think beauty is what I feel that I have most control over. But what is more important to me is not allowing for there to be a known, for there to be different ways of looking at things we take for granted. And seeing that as maybe a possible, or maybe a lack of answer being what's more real.
Yeah, you bringing up the idea of being a poet of the grotesque and beauty next to ugliness. I wonder, this is just something I'm thinking about now, is what do you feel like, for both of you, your relationship is to discomfort in your poems? Is that something that you feel like you want to excite or bring into your work? Just thinking about like that relationship between the things that are hard and soft, or beautiful and ugly, like that I can see in your work, Philip, definitely. I think also in your work, Gala.
Well, I wanted to kind of, I guess, respond to what Philip was saying. So maybe, and this is good because you're sort of, you're stretching like what he was saying. And I think that when you were talking about the intention of rendering what is assumed to be familiar unfamiliar, I was thinking about that as like a gateway to compassion, right? Because I think that when people can admit that they don't know what they know, then there's like space to actually see what is around them, to learn how to look. And that's the place where compassion happens. That's the place where we can actually like see each other and be present for each other in a different way. So I think that that's really similar to what you're asking, like the experience of like juxtaposing opposites. I mean, they're always there, right? So I think if they're not in the writing, then that's a miss. Like that's a disjuncture from what we experience as beauty. Beauty always has a shadow. It can't exist without it. Nothing that is compelling in this world is pure.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I also think that what you're saying about that, to highlight the idea of like putting people in a space that feels unfamiliar, making the familiar unfamiliar, showing readers that maybe they don't know what they know. That can be an uncomfortable space too. And there's such value in that space because of the way that as you say, it's like causing you to really see and look in a new way. So I want to ask too, about form for both of you. I was really continually surprised by the formal choices you were making in your work and like the innovation in form. And so I just wanted to know if you could just speak a bit about your relationship to form and how you arrive at the shapes that you choose in your poems.
They just come sometimes.
It just comes.
So for Mushmouth's Maybe Crown with all the M words and M sounds, I'm trying to make sure I'm telling you the truth. I don't remember. I think what I wanted to do was write a poem. I wanted to write a poem that was all using the letter M. And then I spoke to the poet Joel Diaz Porter, and he was like, also consider the sound of M. So not just beginning with words that have the first letter M, but also I am, A M. They still have that humming resonance at the beginning. And I just opened the poem to many different avenues. But so one is a curiosity. So what is possible? What can I do? And then figuring out if there's a way to have that speak to content or something contextual. And the other is an accident. A pattern just arises, and I arrive to a pattern, and then I exploit it after I've discovered it. And in either case, they are fun, but in some cases, there's a really long poem that the only way I could have finished it is to enforce something that enforce a pattern on it. Otherwise, it would have been just a mess. I wouldn't have been able to even write it, to continue it. The pattern, being able to return to something as foundational in order to spring from it again, was really helpful. So I think for me, form is either accidental, it's a purposeful navigation, like something I've said I wanted to do for the fun of it, to see what's possible, or it is something that I need as a navigational tool in the poem. I'm just trying to figure out how to have all of those things be in family with meaning. Yeah.
Great.
I think it's really interesting to think about you wanting to write this M poem, which you didn't tell us why. You were like, I need to write an M poem, but M is such a humming sound, and so it's kind of a pause, right? Like it's a sound that is happening between two larger sounds often, but your poem with all those M sounds was super staccato and like very strong sounding instead of being a hum. So it is sort of like you took a hum and like broke it up. I think I have like for me, form is really valuable, and sometimes it does come, but I think that often I wind up submitting to it, or like I will have ideas, and then as I start writing them in, I want the form to show me how much space on the page I should take up. Like I think that a lot of the poems in my book, they were very controlled by form because I really wanted to give the reader signaling that they were having different experiences. And so like all the poems that were about one particular aspect of the book, which was like erotic memory, were mostly like in prose blocks or sort of flotational lines, the way memory happens for me, I think. And then all the poems that were slipstreaming into mythos and fairy tale then were super tight and structured. And I think that is because I wanted to make the mythological world the steady world and make it harder and crisper. And I often use like what Era calls like the contrapuntal poem, which I feel like now people say it all the time, but when we were first writing them, like no one did. And when I'm writing the contrapuntal poems, often it's because I'm trying to contain two different energies. So there's like two energies in conversation, and sometimes those energies are people, and sometimes they're just like ways of existing within that like one feeling. So I think those are just some examples. I love a couplet. What can I say?
What is a couplet say to you? Like, why that?
Oh, I don't know. I think because it's tight, but like I like having a lot of space between lines. Like I like to take up a little bit more space on the page, and a couplet lets you kind of like feel the arrows of two lines together, and then it's like, wait a minute. It's like, wait a minute. Because I feel like when you have this, like when they get thicker, they're real chunks of experience.
Mm-hmm.
I like to hop around.
Yeah. I always feel like a couplet's like they're holding hands, those two lines, and they're just like tripping down the page together. So I get you on that one.
I like the tercet because no one should be holding hands.
I like the tercet because it feels like then there's like this third wheel, so it's like unbalanced. I like that. I'm into that too.
I feel like that's a challenge. Like I feel like the tercet is sort of like you're about to get uncomfortable, like every single time. Like this is one line too many, or not.
I think that's what attracts me to it. So I want to ask you guys. So there's probably I can't see all of our audience tonight, but there's most likely a lot of students joining us, and so I want to ask you a little bit about your experience as with your first book out, what it was like to put that together, and you're both MFA grads too, right? So. What was it like to go from thesis to book? Is there a resemblance between what you wrote at the end of your MFA program to what we have in front of us today as your books? And what was that kind of process like for you? If you can talk about that.
I don't know why flipping through my book is going to give me answers.
I'm going to tell you.
Well, the first thing is I came into the MFA with a manuscript I had been working on that ended up not existing at all by the time I got to the thesis. In the thesis, there are quite a few poems that made it to the book, but most of them did not. It's a completely different project. What was told to me and what I still believe is that the thesis is not meant to necessarily be a book. It's like a practice book. It's something that shows to you all the work you've done and how you even think about poetry. What are some of the interests you had while in that program, and where can you go from there? And so I didn't have a lot of pressure on myself to make the thesis into something perfect. The contradiction to that is I was still submitting what was going to be the thesis to contests, and that is what was picked up while I was still at WashU. And I was happy that I got a lot of time to change that because it needed so much help. It was not ready, and it was obvious that it was chosen sure on merit, but also on potential, because it needed work. But there was a way that Carrie and the board at the time at Alice James Books, they saw something in it, and so even though I was striving for a kind of unobtainable perfection, the MFA program allowed for me to play, and really I just wanted to have fun at the end of the day. And so the difference between the thesis and the product of the book isn't necessarily having fun, but it's a sense of what is ready. How do I know this thing is ready to be in the world? And I did not have that kind of wisdom, but I was lucky enough to have guidance throughout and after the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, when I entered, well, first of all, I feel like I want to point out that like in my MFA program, we have like one extra year, right? So 2 years and then another year. And I think that year was really valuable for my like writing and the work that I did. When I entered the program, I had poems, but I didn't think of them as a collection. I had just sort of assumed that I would like go to MFA and I would get it. Like, I was like, I'm not going to any MFA program that's not going to give me money because I need to survive. And then I was like, that's it. And then I was like, and then I'll go to MFA and then I'm going to become a professor and it'll be great. That was like, I just had like a truly like immigrant kid plan. Like, I was just like, this is my plan. This is a way to make my artwork legitimate. I didn't really have a book. And then I feel like I came with poems. A lot of those poems are around in the world and I'm not embarrassed of them, but they're from a younger self that didn't really have like a sharpened voice. Right. And then I think that like most of the poems that I wrote my first year in MFA are not in my book. But during the second year of my MFA program, I started writing the Vasilisa poems. So a lot of the fairy tale reimagining poems. And it was a grief work. Like my dad had died literally in the October that I started my MFA program. So it was it took me a year or so to kind of really get into working around that. And then I was at a residency. I was at Vermont Studio Center, and Lynn Thompson was like, just keep going, go darker, go deeper, So then I just kept doing them, and I had all of these fairy tale mythos poems. And then in my third year, I had a husband, a husband of a friend, who asked me something about my erotic, how I had developed my connection to my erotic self. Not necessarily people talk about when did you know you were gay or whatever, but more when did you understand your sexual self? And that prompt became my fellowship year prompt. I would just wake up every morning and I would write toward it, and I would write memories most of the time, memories of the process by which one becomes sexed. And then I had 2 manuscripts, and then I sent them off to Coffee House. And then Erica was like, well, what if this was 1 manuscript? And that's when the integration work began, because I could see what she saw. I could see that there were shared themes, but that was my process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so great how in some ways the thing that you thought was going to be your books, it turned out maybe it wasn't quite the shape that you imagined, but you had this guidance along the way to get it to where it needed to be, Mm-hmm. So now that those books are out, how has your writing process changed, or what is your writing life now post book? What do you, what's the experience of being, the book is out and now you have to write more things, you're not done. Is that a challenge for you, or what's your relationship to that?
I stopped writing poetry for a very long time after the book came out. I wrote a few new poems, new then, and I submitted them, and then I stopped. And I stopped writing. I actually stopped writing and reading poems unless I was teaching the poems, and I needed to translate that knowledge to students. I needed a refresh button. I was exhausted.
Yeah.
And also, Camille, you did not ask this, but I'm going to answer. I needed a break from poets, if that makes sense. I needed a break from what I thought would be the reality, and then I realized it was not the reality. I came into poetry very naive and very bright-eyed, thinking communities, and that just wasn't across the board what I experienced. I am competitive when it comes to learning something new and seeing something that inspires me. I am not competitive about anything else, not about publications or prizes or groups or anything like that. I just want to read a poem that makes me envious and say, oh, I think I can do that. Mm-hmm. And then figure out that not only can I do that, but I can add something to it. And I feel like that kind of healthy competition became something very deranged. And it just wasn't what I was expecting. It is not anything particular to poets or poetry. It's just the way that a lot of things are. And I was so naive. I thought we were different. And I'm like, well, no, we're just people. Yeah. And what's that, Camille?
We always wish and believe we're different, but it turns out we're just people.
No, we're people. We're flawed, and I have my own flaws that added to a lot of my own consternation with this idea of community, because I was also not appreciative of the many poets, the many people who were always supporting me. I wanted something so idealistic. It was just unintelligent. But I needed to take a break to realize that I was being dishonest with myself, and I was not happy. And so I said, no more poetry, no more reading it. I'm not writing it. And that lasted for 2 years. And then I just started to ease back into it with drafts, and what took over was writing fiction. And so I'm wrapping up that project now. And then when that's done, I'll return, because I haven't actually touched Mutiny since January. I'll return to that. So it was a lot of reckoning, self-reckoning, and it's reckoning with what do I believe in, and who are the friends I have in this,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to grow up.
I just feel like you're being a little mean to yourself.
Were you mean to yourself after your book came out, Gala, or was it a totally different experience?
No, I mean, it wasn't different or the same. It was just other. I mean, it was different because we're different. I just feel like having your beautiful collective Piscean dream is not unintelligent. It's just maybe not realizable in this moment. I think what's hard for me, and my book came out, and what's still hard is just that, like, I couldn't share it with my family, and it raised a lot of like other kinds of feelings in me that I didn't, it's like you're never prepared for like your triggered feelings. You're like, oh, cool, it's great. I'm having this moment. And I was just dealing with a lot of different emotional stuff, but in terms of just my relationship to poetry, I think I'm just trying to figure out, like, these poems have just come, and when they come, I let them come, and I don't seek them out. I'm still trying to figure out what it is I want to do, because when I was writing the kind of making of the sexual self, it was what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to think about those moments where people who identify as women, like, start to realize that they're an object, right? And it happens so young. And I wanted to just be inside of that moment. And now I want to be in some other contemplation, and I don't know what that is yet. So I think that until I'm inside of it, I don't have that thing where I'm sitting and I'm like, oh, I'm going to write about this thing today. I think that it's like, I'm too busy crying about ICE detention centers every day. I'm like, what am I doing? But on the other hand of like that sort of righteousness is the fact that I have been developing a lot of different prose work, and it's the same time frame. It's still like, it takes me a long time. I'll come back to an essay. I've been writing one essay for like 2.5 years. I'm just
a poet's pace, I think.
Like, why not? Like, no one's upset. That's the thing. It's like, I think sometimes there is sort of this pressure, especially in this world that we're talking about, to always be productive, to always be like showing people what you're making, and to prove that you deserve to be here. And I'm like, nobody cares when I get this essay out from me. Mm-hmm. So I think that I've been working really hard to come to it when it feels good and powerful, and like I am doing something beyond my ego, or like beyond serving a false idea of productivity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that touches on something I wanted to ask about too. I mean, I think that in these last few weeks, there's been both like this kind of push to be productive during this time when we're all in social isolation, and then also a backlash against that push, like just calm down. So I wonder, like, what is your creative practice been like in the past few weeks? Like, is there a creative practice? Have you approached a creative practice at all? Like, how do you feel about like your writing right now? And has it been a time that's fruitful, or just like so full of worry and so fraught that it's not? Like, what's happening for you as writers right now?
I've been sleeping.
Yeah.
And I mean, is that part of the creative mode? I'm sure I can say yes or no. I'm not worrying about making right now. Mm-hmm. I just want to survive. I also think that I am in survival mode and don't know it. Mm-hmm. So I want to honor where I am in that space, and productivity is going to happen regardless. It can happen later. I'm doing a lot of reading, listening to a lot of podcasts, speaking with friends, and I'm not having a good time. I'm having a time that is reconnecting me to people I care about, and when I didn't have the time to do that, well, I was constantly, working and doing gigs here and there. So I'm appreciating the slowdown, even though I know it's coming from a space that's not the greatest at all.
Yeah.
But I do feel like all of that feeds my creativity of listening to people I love and who I've missed dearly, and seeing their faces and connecting with them in ways that, I mean, I've learned so much about people in these last 3 weeks to a month and a half that I've known from in years. So I feel very, very fed by slowing down and not thinking about the page as much.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll sketch a line or touch a chapter here or there. But for me, it's about rest, healing, self-understanding, which is a constant journey. It's not, it never ends. But this has really been the initiation of closeness and intimacy, strangely enough, right? And Gala used the word compassion earlier. I feel that heavy right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm there with you, and I'm not like I'm of both minds, which is that like I think that I am. Well, first of all, the work that I do is the same, right? So it's like I work from home, I write astrology articles, so I'm still doing that, and so I have to be productive. But I've noticed that my mind, it takes so much longer for me to write a sentence. I'm just like I have to go back to the same sentence and be like, what was I saying again? And I think it winds up draining a lot of my creative writing energy, right? Because I try to make the work that I produce for NYLON as close to lyrical as they'll allow it to be. And I think that because of that, it winds up taking up a lot of my creative force. And yeah, and also like I have a lot of insecurity right now, like in a lot of different aspects of my life. And so for me, it feels like the one thing that I need to do is just cultivate personal steadiness at every turn. And so most of my days are spent in like doing somatic exercises, yoga, prayer, like over and over and over and over again, like offering free tarot card readings for everybody on my close friends list. Like it's because that is the only way that I feel steady. So if I don't feel steadied by staring at my screen for 4 hours, like trying to eke out the last dregs of creative energy that I have after like submitting articles for the week. So it's hard, but I mean, I also feel like an accomplishment anytime I do something that I have my own sort of like bars against. And some of those bars are like administrative work, like writing a cover letter or like writing an overview for a book proposal or like making zucchini bread. Like I have weird cooking blocks. So like every time I've like made food that's not just like throw these ingredients in the pot and heat them, I've been like, behold, I am your productive goddess, So it's both things. Like, I think there is a part of me, especially like the Sylvia part, that's like, suck it up, get shit together, do this stuff. And then another part of me that's like, I couldn't possibly.
I'm impressed you made zucchini bread. So, I mean, you got me with that. That's great. All right, so I'm going to turn to questions from the audience. We have a couple have come in so far. So I'll start with this question from Heran. So she asks, what is your relationship to audience in the writing stages of your work as opposed to editing and publishing? And is there a person or group that you intend a piece for or a whole book for? Have we stumped you?
No, just after I talk a lot, I want Philip to talk.
Philip, I mean, I guess the question is like, are you writing for a particular audience? Is that something that's on your mind?
I'm writing for me. It's not selfish. I'm writing for me. I'm writing for me with the hope that what I have to say to myself will also resonate with other people. Mm-hmm. I have no doubts of anyone's intellectual capacity, so I use the words that I know, as long as they are, as big as they are, as archaic as they may be, because that was what people did with me. They trusted me, and they trusted that I was open to learning, and I feel like giving my audience not just the benefit of the doubt, but the acknowledgement that they're so capacious as people with love and intelligence, and not underestimating them, or even thinking there's a common denominator amongst them. We're talking about potentially 8 billion people there is no common denominator. We have no idea what anyone is capable of. So I do what I'm capable of and let it live the life that it's going to live. So that's my answer to audience. And then my answer to the second part is the book, could a book be for someone or for a particular audience? Or I think Thief in the Interior, when I put all the poems together, all the poems that were just me getting my own thoughts out, and I put them together, I realized that the book was a way of me measuring out these 4 years of absolute sadness. They were created in really dark times for me. Mm. And I was reluctant of even sharing the book. I wanted to edit a lot of that stuff out and maybe write something different. But as far as the book or the project, if I had anyone in mind to read it, I think I wanted, thinking about the object, I just wanted it to reach folks who had a kind of sadness that they didn't know what to do with. Yeah.
I love that. I also write for me. I also write for spirit. So it's both. Like I write for me and whatever it is. Like if there's something compelling me, I want to serve the sound that I'm hearing inside, and I want to match that like sound or vibration or tone with the thing that I am making. So I think what warts me or upsets me most is where I can't seem to, like, it doesn't come out the way it feels. That's when I get upset. I think that that's like my primary audience when I do the work. But it is also true that most of my work, whatever writing it is, poetry, essay, whatever, I mean, it's mostly for a queer audience. And I think it's funny, like, after I wrote Without Protection, my editors, I don't remember if it was Erica or somebody else, were like, oh, do you want to put notes in the end? And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I love indexes. Why not? And all my notes, like so many of those notes are like very, very sapphic jokes. And I think that, like, I've read reviews where people were like, I don't think she needs those notes, or like, I don't know if these notes are necessary. And I'm like, they're probably not, but they're also probably not for you, And I think that, like, it didn't upset me. It was just indicative. I was like, oh, like these, like, there are people who don't understand why they're there. They don't understand this, like, Tegan and Sarah joke from 2007, and that's okay. Like, they don't have to.
I loved your notes personally. I'm not even the intended audience, but I enjoyed the spirit of them. So there's another question from the audience, from Kosi. Question for both of you. After immersing yourself in a text revolving around myth or another specific topic, how does that immersion aid and or limit your future poetic and fictive vision?
Can you read the how does part again?
How does that immersion in whatever topic you've been immersed in, how does it aid and or limit your future poetic and fictive vision?
Gotcha. Well, if I think about the transition between Thief in the Interior and what may become Mutiny, they're completely different. I can only speak to the idea that I needed time so that the immersion expired, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had to kind of like let it filter out of your system.
It had to filter out. Otherwise, I would have written the same book again.
Yeah. I relate to that experience. I felt similarly when I finished it wasn't even like I was immersed in one topic, but just that I had to kind of reset and think, okay, what am I doing next, and not in that space anymore, So
right. And then also the idea of reading. I read so much during that silence that was not poetry, so a lot of nonfiction and short stories and novels. So I was feeding myself different frequencies anyway, and I was learning more about myself as someone who needed desperately a spiritual connection, a spiritual practice. So it wasn't just intellectual. It had a lot going on. And so the immersion for me, I won't say it disappeared, it just evolved. I'm still writing about myth. I think I started that in Thief, but I'm a different person from who I was when I did that. And it just took time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like it's like I have two answers, and like the first one, which is sort of my like, is like, I don't care if I write the same poem. Like, I'll write the same poem. Like, we're the same person. I mean, we're changing and we're growing, but we have the same history, and we're in a sort of like constant relationship to the context. And if I'm writing about the same thing from like the sixth angle, then that's my business. You know, like, that's my poetic business to write about the same thing from like yet another angle. But on a sort of on the tip of like what mythology does or doesn't, I think I love mythology, right? I've always loved it. And I think also as somebody who grew up kind of without God, I loved thinking about gods. Like, I love thinking about what forces moved whole civilizations and destroyed them and raised them up and saved them, and over and over and over again. And I think that like the myths that I write about and Without Protection are, I mean, they're like Soviet myths, right? But mythology and Soviet culture often served to be kind of an archive for the gods that were outlawed. That people couldn't practice. And so there was a lot of like rite and ritual that was outlawed from the land that was kind of infused into the myth and the fable of Soviet culture. And like Baba Yaga, for me personally, is just like a mythologized iteration of the crone, and therefore just like the mother goddess and the dark earth. And I'm going to be writing about the mother goddess for the rest of my life, like, but it might not always have that name because I'm not always trying to work with like uncovering.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was an uncovering, and sometimes I'm working with maybe just company, walking with something that's a shadow more than a name. Mm-hmm. I think the limitation comes when people expect things of you, but it's not really limitation that I feel, or that I think you can choose to feel it or not, but you can perceive it. So it's a limitation you can perceive. I perceive a limitation when people talk about my work as if it's like primarily interested in the fable, when actually it's primarily interested in like intergenerational trauma. And I perceive a limitation when people talk about my work and they'll just describe it as like lesbian poetry, which is fine. Like, it's fine, but that's just not like, I don't think that our identities are our craft. They are like our lens. Mm-hmm. You know? So I think those limitations come in because like the fable of the lesbian poet, but the myth of one. I think those they're not me, but they exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the idea that you can be more than one thing. Yeah. I like that idea.
More than one thing.
Yeah. But I think that sense, it's great to be thinking about it in terms of like perceiving that limitation, but not taking it on yourself, especially when it comes to what you're writing about, because I think that it's not like you can write about something and be like, I did it, it's finished, I got it right, I've explained it, something that's complex is the things that you're engaging with. So I understand that. Yeah. So we have one more question. Someone just texted me a question because she couldn't log in. So this is a question from Stephanie. And she asks, what is the poet's role in a time of social and political crisis, specifically one as unprecedented as the moment that we're in right now? Yeah, so just like, what do you think? What are we all supposed to be doing? Answer us.
Go ahead, Philip, take it on.
You go. Well, no, because I don't want the last word, so no, I will.
Okay.
I don't. What is anybody's role? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I don't want to sound dismissive. This is a role like, what is anyone's role during this time? I just want to live. I'll say that. I want to be in my moment. I want to feel as though I can help whoever is around me, whoever I'm close to. And if there's someone I don't know and I have resources, to share those resources. I do not want to buckle my poetry or my identity as a poet to anything that is politically driven, because the political moment is constantly changing. And I don't know how I'm going to react to those, because I'm still a person. I think my role as a poet is the same as the role as someone who's an architect, who's a teacher in general. Is just to figure out what we can do and then figure out the best ways of doing that. How can I be helpful? Mm-hmm. Okay, this is how I'm going to manage, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm going to write this poem that's going to rally. Some folks might find that to be their mission. Fine, but I don't want to get into the conversation of it's the poet's responsibility to do X, Y, and Z. That's not how I think of art in general. I think there are still people within the world who, regardless of our labels or our identities or our jobs, we have very particular ways of moving through the world, and our needs are constantly changing. So what is healthiest for us to do as it concerns in being healthy for ourselves, and maintaining some semblance of peace and sure, love, open-heartedness, generosity. I think the word I'm looking for is generosity towards other people. How to be a citizen to not just ideas, but to just the way that we can build community. And that comes in different ways, regardless of our jobs or what we consider ourselves.
I think this question is also interesting to me. I mean, I feel like I've probably held it my whole life, right? Like, I think we have a contemporary moment now, which is, I think, particularly sort of just like a new reality. But I think that for me, when you pose this question, I feel like the thing that comes up right away is the question of like the alteration of that question, which is not that what I could be asked personally is not what role does a poet have in this contemporary moment, but what role does an American poet have in this contemporary moment? And I'm thinking about the way that like different nations have very different relationships to poetry, right? And we kind of know that. I mean, I know that like in a Russian sense, or like, I mean, whatever, like Jewish Russian sense, but like the poet, like I'm thinking about revolutions, and I'm thinking about like moments of national crisis in countries where the poets are sort of like the heralds and the keepers of of change and the witnesses. And you know, poets like Anna Akhmatova and like Neruda and like poets that people spoke like, and William Butler Yeats, you know, people like really held these verses as the thing that kept them going on, right? And that's not necessarily what happens in an oversaturated nation like the kind that we have, which is like it just like produces all the time, which is not necessarily a criticism of the plethora of work. It's just a fact. And so then what role does an American poet have? Well, I think it might be, I guess, if we were to imagine a poet as a monolith, which it is not, a kind of poetic nature, right? A nature of observation, a dedication to witness, exists in theoretically all poets, whether they're working or not, whether they're writing or not. So then the role is about bearing witness and being curious about what's actually happening versus like what is being said. So like cultivating curiosity, bearing witness, and being the keepers of history. So, and that might mean that results in beautiful work that responds to the moment in a really literal way. It might be work that survives incredible violence. So like share something that's compelling and beautiful and altogether different from what we could expect or know. or it could be the people who are within families that can't be writing, who need to do something else, but they have a poet's soul.
Yeah.
You know, and they're taking care of their whatever formation of thing they call a family is, and that's what their role is.
Well, thank you both for those beautiful answers. We have a couple of minutes left in which I'm going to ask just one more easier question, I hope, which is, are you guys finding ways of continuing to have a community in this time with other writers, or like what are you kind of doing? What are you doing to still feel like in touch with the writing world, or are you?
I don't know when it was, but maybe 2 or 3 nights ago, I did this late night marathon reading of other people's poems. And I was so surprised by how many attended and stayed for those 3 hours. I think I don't even know what time I started. Maybe 11. It was late. It was late, yo. And folks were coming in and out, but you know, it was touching just to see people wanting to hear poems that late for that long. And so that's one of the things that I've done, is just to say, you know, here's some books that I've loved, here's some poems I've loved. Here, I'm just gonna read them, and if you want to join me, please. And if you don't, then you know, I'm still here for you to text, and you know, if you want to just send a poem that you've been working on, if we're close, just to keep it manageable for me, you know. But it's actually the words that have kept me close to a lot of folks, just reading other people's poems and doing things like this with a few folks, and yeah.
Well, I think that my community is really mixed. So I think that I have some, like I have poets in my community, but also artists and like nightlife performers, etc. So, I mean, I'm really just devoted to keeping company to the people who are like part of my intimate circle, you know? I already have to like have 2-hour-long phone calls with my mother where all she talks about is like that one thing she's angry about 5 years ago. So it's like my emotional bandwidth is pretty tight, you know? But you know, I've done a couple of like readings more informal or whatever, but I also do the podcast with my friend. So just like there's a lot of different smaller projects, you know? I think the thing that I've been doing privately in relation is that I've been like a lot of the week I'll tell people that I'll pull a tarot card for them, and then on the Instagram, and then people will just ask me questions, and then it becomes a moment for me to, first of all, like get connected to spirit and to like my gods, but also to offer a moment of presence for somebody else and what they're moving through. That's been like my sort of, in that framework, I do wind up interchanging with a lot of writers or like creative community facilitators, because those are the people that are there. But I think that a lot of my days are spent either like money working, whatever that means, or just having like very long phone calls with people who are sad. So I, you know, yeah, it's not my primary thing, the poetry community, although I'm open to it.
Yeah.
Please invite me.
Everyone invite Gala. Thank you so much to both of you for being in community with us tonight. It's been so wonderful to talk to you and see your faces. It just makes me miss poets and writers and, you know, being around people, which I'm an introvert, so that's kind of amazing for me.
Right. Same.
I'm like, oh yeah, people. So it was so great to talk to you and so wonderful to hear your work. It's such a gift. I'm gonna hold up your books. So normally right now I'd be like, go buy their books and get them signed. And since that is not possible, but it's still possible to buy these books from your favorite independent bookstore.
Together, they have like a vibe. Am I right?
Look at these beauties. Look at them. So yeah, go seek them out from your favorite bookstore. It's a great time to be catching up on some reading. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been wonderful. I wish I could see your faces, but goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye. Bye, Gala. Bye, Camille.